Science is all about making observations, and oftentimes those observations require special tools. In the science lab, we use many different tools for many different things, such as observing the length of an object, its mass, temperature, volume, or even density. Before we get started, let's take a minute to brainstorm some answers to the following questions. What unit would you use if you were taking a trip from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles, California? Take a second and record your answers. Before we get started, take a minute to brainstorm the answers to the following questions. What unit would you use to measure the following? Please write the answers on the top of your note page. A trip from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles, California. Remember, you can press pause at any time to pause the recording so you have plenty of time to write your answers down and do your best. What unit would you use to measure the amount of milk in a glass? How tall you are? Or your weight? Let's take a second and go back and review the answers that you may have written down. If you were taking a trip, you might measure that trip in miles or kilometers. If you were measuring the amount of milk in a glass, you might have measured it in something such as cups or liters. If you were measuring your height, you may have measured it in feet and inches, or meters, or even centimeters. If you were measuring your weight, you may have stepped on a scale that measures your weight in pounds or kilograms. Depending on the observation that you're making, you'll use different tools. Before we learn about the tools you'll use, let's take a minute to learn about some of the measurements that you might make. The first type of measurement is the mass. Mass is the quantity of matter in something. If you remember, the word quantity sounds a lot like the word quantitative, which lets us know that we're measuring and getting a number as our answer. When we look for mass, we use the instrument, a triple beam balance or a digital scale. This year in 6th grade, you will be using both of these instruments. The basic unit of mass is a gram. By saying basic unit, that means everything is based on tenths of a gram. We might talk about small amounts, such as a milligram, or larger amounts, such as kilograms. Here's a picture of a triple beam balance that you'll be using this year. Please, again, make sure to pause this recording anytime you need to make sure you get the definitions, the tools, and the units written down correctly. Let's move on to our second unit, is volume. Volume measures the amount of space that something takes up. Volume in the science lab is often measured using a graduated cylinder. The basic unit of volume is a liter. Just like the gram, liters can be broken up into larger units or smaller units using a base of 10. For example, you might measure something very tiny in milliliters or larger quantities in liters. Here's a picture of a graduated cylinder, like the ones that you'll be using later in the week. Our last item is the length. Length is a measurement of size. You're probably familiar with the measurement of length. Length is determined using a variety of tools. For example, you may use a meter stick, a tape measure, or a ruler. In the metric system, the basic unit is the meter. You may have heard of millimeters, which are very small, which move into centimeters, meters, and even larger units like kilometers. When making measurements in the science lab, it is extremely important to be accurate and careful. Just like when baking, adding too much of one chemical or component of an experiment can result in a catastrophe. Now, let's take a second to use what you learned. Look at the questions at the bottom and take a minute to reflect. Which metric unit would be the best to measure the following? The mass of your Chromebook, the length of your pencil, or the volume of water in an aquarium? The mass of your Chromebook would be best measured in grams, perhaps kilograms. If you were measuring the length of your pencil in metric, the best measurement would be centimeters, although you may have said millimeters or meters. Millimeters is a little bit too small, and the meter is a little bit too large. The volume of water in an aquarium would be best measured in liters.